I woke up on my 64th birthday with a sense of quiet hope. I brewed coffee in my Asheville kitchen, the one my late husband Harold and I remodeled ourselves in the 90s. I wore my good cardigan, the periwinkle one with pearl buttons, and even curled the ends of my hair. I hadn't heard from my son Colin in days, but I told myself he was probably planning something. After all, birthdays used to mean something in this family. At 11:12 a.m. the doorbell rang. I opened it to see Colin standing there, holding a small bouquet of carnations, my least favorite, though I didn't tell him. He smiled the same way he did when he wanted something as a boy. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, reaching in for a quick perfunctory hug. "Oh honey, you came," I whispered, my heart warming. "Of course. Go get dressed. We've got lunch reservations. Real nice place." He tapped his watch. I didn't ask questions. I felt giddy. I changed into my church shoes, the ones that pinch a little but look sharp, and grabbed my purse. We drove west toward the mountains, not toward downtown where the good restaurants were. I glanced at the road signs. We passed a gas station I didn't recognize. A retirement community billboard flashed by. Mountain View Senior Living, where peace begins. "Colin?" I asked, my voice tightening. "Where exactly are we going?" He didn't answer right away, just turned the radio up a notch and kept driving. Finally, as the main entrance to the senior home came into view, he pulled into the driveway, braked and parked. Then he sighed and looked at me. "Mom, we need to talk." I sat frozen. "What is this?" "I know you've been struggling lately," he said carefully. "The memory lapses, the loneliness. You're not safe alone anymore." I blinked confused. "What memory lapses?"
"Colin, I'm fine."
He opened the glove box and pulled out a manila envelope. "This is the paperwork. Everything's arranged. You'll have your own room, activities, friends. You won't be isolated anymore." I stared at the bold lettering on the building. Mountain View Admissions. "I made pancakes this morning," I said softly, more to myself than him. "I set the table for two." Colin didn't respond. Instead, he got out of the car and opened the trunk. My suitcase was already packed. "You went through my things?" I whispered. "It's for your own good, Mom. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I felt the sting of humiliation rise behind my eyes, but I swallowed it down. My hands trembled as I opened the car door. Inside the facility, I was greeted with soft pastels and too much air freshener. A smiling receptionist greeted me, like I was a hotel guest. Colin handed her the envelope. She glanced at the forms and nodded. "Room 214. We've been expecting her." They'd been expecting me. I hadn't signed anything, hadn't consented, but apparently, I didn't need to. Among the papers was a transfer of power of attorney, naming Colin Walker as my legal guardian. His signature, and mine, or what looked like mine. A nurse offered to walk me to my room. Colin didn't even come with me. He said he had a call to take and waved from the lobby like a businessman in a hurry. Room 214 smelled faintly of bleach and something sweet, like artificial strawberries. There was a twin bed, a wardrobe and a small window facing a brick wall. That was my birthday gift. A view of cement and silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, coat still on, and watched the suitcase at my feet like it belonged to someone else. Inside were my slippers, two cardigans, and a paperback novel I hadn't finished. He hadn't even brought my glasses. Hours passed. The carnations wilted in their plastic wrap on the dresser. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat, hands folded in my lap, heart racing like I was standing on the edge of something enormous. Later, I would learn just how deep his betrayal went. But in that moment, the wound was fresh and raw and real. On the day I turned 64, my only son took away my home, my freedom, and my name. Not with malice. Worse, with a smile. The first night at Mountain View Senior Living, I didn't sleep. I lay there in that unfamiliar bed, the sheets stiff with industrial starch, staring at the ceiling tiles like they might give me answers. I hadn't cried yet. I hadn't screamed. I was still in shock, still playing back Colin's voice in my head, soft and rehearsed. "You'll thank me someday." That's what he'd said when he handed over the legal papers. A son's gift to his mother. A room with no locks, no freedom, and no exit. The next morning, I asked the nurse at the front desk if I could use my phone. She looked confused, then sympathetic. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, that sing-song tone reserved for toddlers and the elderly. "Your son asked us to keep it safe for now. He said the phone was causing you stress." I blinked. "It wasn't. I want it back." She frowned. "He also mentioned you were having trouble remembering things." I wanted to shout, to tell her I was fine, that my memory was intact, that I wasn't losing my mind. But I knew how it would look. A 64-year-old woman arguing at the front desk in slippers, no family present, a file in the system that likely flagged me as confused. I stepped back, heart pounding. Later that day, I tried using the public desktop computer in the common lounge. It was older than I was and half the keys stuck. I logged into my bank account, or tried to. The password didn't work. I reset it. The recovery code never came. My email? Locked. I clicked around frantically, heat rising in my chest, fingers shaking over the sticky keys. Finally, I clicked account activity. Everything was rerouted. The email address on file wasn't mine. It was a variation. My name, but with a number added, something Colin might have created. My recovery questions were changed. My backup contact was him. I wasn't locked out of my life. I'd been locked into something else entirely. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed again, palms pressed against my knees. I finally let a tear slip. Not because I was scared, not yet, but because I was starting to understand. This wasn't about safety. It wasn't about love. It was about control. Colin hadn't just brought me here on a whim. He hadn't dropped off an aging mother out of panic or fear. He'd planned this, methodically, patiently, with enough fake concern to convince anyone who asked. I was forgetting things, he said. I was struggling to keep up. Never mind that I still managed my bills, still volunteered at the local library, still read the news every morning while drinking my coffee black. But here, in this facility, those truths didn't follow me. Here, I was just another old woman with declining faculties. No phone, no bank access, no voice. They called me Eleanor. Ellie dear. Sweetheart. Never Mrs. Hastings. Never the businesswoman. Never the widow who built her own second life after heartbreak. Just a birthday girl in beige who'd been tucked away quietly and legally, like a family heirloom no one wanted to display anymore. It wasn't until the third day that the final piece clicked. Colin hadn't just gained guardianship. He'd become the sole controller of my estate. He could sell the house, empty the accounts, decide what medication I took, what I wore, where I lived, whether I lived at all. And no one, not the staff, not the courts, not the neighbors I used to bake lemon bars for, would question him. Because who listens to a woman in a nursing home when her son says she's confused? That night I didn't sleep again. But this time I wasn't in shock. I was awake. Fully, furiously awake. And I started planning. By day 5, I had memorized the ceiling tiles above my bed. 56 squares, 3 fluorescent lights, 1 suspicious water stain shaped like the state of Ohio. The nurses rotated like clockwork, efficient, polite, and distant. I was just another file, another sweet little old lady on the 3rd floor. Then came Imani. She didn't walk into my room like a nurse. She walked in like a woman who had somewhere better to be but chose to be here anyway. Braids wrapped in a patterned scarf. Sharp eyes. A clipboard hugged tight to her chest. "Miss Hastings?" she asked. "Ellie," I said. She smiled. "Ellie it is. I'm just here to check your vitals." She took my blood pressure, listened to my heart. But instead of rushing out, she sat on the edge of the chair by the window and said, "You don't belong here." I raised a brow. "That's not a line they train you to say." "I'm off script," she said with a wink. For the first time in a week, I laughed. Imani kept talking, asking me about books I liked, movies I remembered, places I'd traveled. I answered every question clearly, and she never once looked at me like I was confused. When I mentioned that I used to run a grant-writing firm in Charleston, she just said, "Figures. You talk like someone used to being in charge." Later that afternoon, Imani returned. This time she had a box. "Found this in the lost and found," she said. "Your son must have dumped it when he dropped off your suitcase. Thought you'd want it back." I opened the lid. Inside were odds and ends. a worn paperback, some knitting needles, and my old wallet still zipped shut. I opened it slowly. Expired coupons. A photo of Colin from 2005, a few crumpled receipts, and a lottery ticket. A bright blue scratch-off I'd tucked in there weeks ago, half forgotten. The kind you grab at the gas station just for fun. Imani peered over my shoulder. That from the big drawing last month? I squinted. Might be. I never checked. She pulled out her phone. Well, now we're checking. We sat on the bed together like two teenagers sneaking a secret. I read out the numbers. She tapped them in one by one. Then her face froze. Ellie, she whispered. You won. I blinked. Won what? She turned the screen to face me. 32 million. After taxes? About 21. I just stared at her. You okay? She asked. I wasn't. Because in that moment, every fiber of my world tilted. Not from the money but from what it meant. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't just someone's burden. I was a millionaire. In silence, I folded the ticket and slipped it into my sock, close to the bone. I didn't laugh. I didn't cheer. I didn't even smile. Instead, I looked at Imani and said, "Help me disappear." She didn't blink. "Give me one day." And just like that, hope bloomed. Not loud, not cinematic, but steady, like a pilot light flickering back to life in a winter storm. Because I might have been trapped in a place designed to erase people like me. But now I had options. And options change everything. The next morning, Imani walked in wearing a hoodie over her scrubs, and a look that said she'd already broken a rule or two. "You sure about this?" she whispered. I nodded. "Let's move." She handed me a manila folder and a disposable phone. "That lawyer I told you about? Dean Ramirez. He's waiting on your call." I didn't ask how she found him. I didn't need to. Imani was the kind of woman who knew how to make things happen, and how to keep her mouth shut. That night, I waited until the halls quieted. I slipped on a pair of borrowed sneakers, shoved the lottery ticket into a zippered pouch tucked into my waistband, and walked calmly down the corridor.
No alarms. No suspicion.
Just a tired old woman going for a bathroom break. Imani met me by the back service entrance. She opened the door and said, "Run quiet, Miss Ellie." I turned. "It's just Ellie now." We hugged fast, fierce. Then I was gone. Outside, the air hit like freedom. Crisp, dark, full of possibility. A beat-up Ford sedan idled near the alley. Inside was Dean Ramirez, early 40s, sharp beard, sharper mind. "You got the ticket?" he asked. I nodded. "And a reason to disappear." He glanced at the mirror. "Then let's make you a ghost." The next 72 hours were a blur of legal steps and whispered coordination. Dean moved like a man who'd done this before. He knew the right banker, the right notary, even a sympathetic county clerk in another district who filed under sealed credentials. The lottery winnings went into a blind trust under a new name, Evelyn Hart. I wanted something close to my real name, I said. But cleaner. Freer. Dean smiled. "Ms. Hart, your trust is now fully established. Your son can't trace a dime of it." We opened a new account, separate from the trust, to handle day-to-day expenses. A modest monthly transfer would give me more than enough to live comfortably, without drawing attention. Next came the documents. Dean updated my will, drafted a healthcare directive, filed an affidavit declaring I'd left the senior facility of my own accord, mentally sound and under no coercion. It wouldn't stop Brandon from trying something legal later, but it would protect me. I watched him print out my new identity paperwork and slide it across the table. Evelyn Hart, 64, retired consultant, currently residing in. Where am I residing? I asked. Dean flipped open a folder. An old lake cabin in North Carolina, recently purchased under the trust name. Quiet, off-grid. Title's clean. I exhaled. Perfect. That evening, he handed me keys to a Toyota Corolla registered to the trust. "You'll want to take the scenic route," he said. "Stay off major highways." I smiled. I've always preferred the long way. I left that city without a backwards glance. No suitcase. No goodbye. Just a burner phone, a new name, and 21 million reasons to stay gone. The drive took most of the night. I crossed state lines as the sky turned lavender with morning. It felt poetic, like the sun was rising just for me. The cabin was small but solid, cedar siding, a porch swing, and a wood-burning stove that smelled like safety. No neighbors close enough to see me, no digital footprint, just a mailbox and a gravel drive. I unpacked slowly my one duffel bag, the folder of documents, and a coffee tin where I hid the winning ticket, and a flash drive of everything Dean helped me prepare. When I finally sat down on the porch swing, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just breathed. Because in a world that tried to lock me away quietly, I had found the loudest revenge. Freedom. And I hadn't even started yet. Would you like me to continue with idea 5? Ellie's realization and gathering evidence?
Bạn đã nói.
Idea 5 in 650 words. 5. Uncovering deeper deception. Ellie discovers Colin had been committing financial fraud in her name for years, even forging her late husband's signature. She begins building an airtight case. Chat đã nói? Here is idea 5. Uncovering deeper deception, developed into a 650-word narrative. Title working, he didn't just betray me, he stole years of my life. The cabin was quiet, but my thoughts weren't. I thought I'd finally escaped, that the worst was behind me. But peace has a way of drawing the truth to the surface. And sometimes when you slow down, the ghosts catch up. One morning, while organizing old files I had managed to salvage from my house before Colin had it cleared out, I came across a stack of unopened mail I'd stuffed into a folder labeled Miscellaneous. At the time, I was too overwhelmed to read them. Now, with coffee in hand and the woods silent around me, I started sifting through. The first few were junk. The next, statements from a credit union I didn't recognize. First, I thought it was a mistake. But there it was, my name, Margaret Eleanor Collins, listed as the co-signer on a business loan dated nearly 7 years ago. A loan I never took. For a business I didn't own. My hand froze. I checked the date, the amount $85000, and the signature. My signature. Except it wasn't. It looked like mine, but the E in Eleanor looped too wide, and the G in Margaret curved the wrong way. My late husband, Thomas, had once told me that no one could forge me because I had a schoolteacher's pen grip that never changed. He was right. But this wasn't just a bad forgery, it was deliberate. Sloppy but deliberate. I dug deeper. Over the next 2 days I pored over every scrap of paperwork, every email login I still had access to, every tax filing and utility bill. I called the county records office from a burner number and requested property records tied to my old address. Then I contacted Dean. I need you to help me run background checks on my own life, I said. He didn't ask why. Just told me, send what you have. Together we unraveled the web. Colin, my son, my only child, had been quietly draining me for years. He had used my name to co-sign at least 3 business loans, and had borrowed against the equity in my home without my consent. Worse still, he had forged Thomas's signature on a retirement fund withdrawal just months before Thomas passed away. That account had been intended for emergency medical care. Something Thomas never ended up needing, because he died suddenly in his sleep. Peacefully, or so I thought. What if the stress Colin put him under contributed to it? That thought made my stomach turn. But the final straw came when Dean forwarded a flagged report from a credit monitoring service. Colin had filed tax returns in my name, 2 years in a row, requesting refunds sent to a P.O. box in his name. I hadn't even noticed. He had filed early and used my old filing data. I didn't cry. Not then. I just felt hollow. Like someone had scooped out my trust with a dull spoon and left the shell behind. Colin hadn't just taken my money. He'd stolen years of my life piece by piece. Behind a smile and Sunday phone calls. I didn't want revenge, but I needed justice. So I got to work. Dean and I organized everything. Timestamps, statements, forged documents, even audio files of old voicemails where Colin made vague references to taking care of paperwork for me. Dean brought in a forensic handwriting expert who confirmed the signatures were fakes. We're building a case so airtight, Dean said. He won't even be able to lie to himself about it. I nodded, because this time, I wasn't going to let him explain it away with charm or tears. This time I had the proof, and soon everyone else would too. The summons came folded in crisp white paper, official, cold, and exactly what I expected. Colin had filed a petition in Clark County to have me declared legally incompetent. I sat at the breakfast table of my small cabin, the same table where I now planned my future, and stared at my son's signature on the documents. He claimed I was confused, paranoid, emotionally unstable. He referenced my disappearance, the abrupt financial decisions, and refusal to communicate with family. There was even a statement from a neighbor, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, saying I'd seemed disoriented in recent months. Dean, my attorney, placed the file on the counter without a word. "They're moving fast," he said. "We need to be faster." I smiled grimly. Let's give them a show they won't forget. Court was set for the following Friday. I dressed in navy blue, ironed my slacks, and clipped my hair back like I had when I used to speak at community college luncheons. I wanted to look like someone who had nothing to hide because I didn't. Colin was already seated at the petitioner's table when I entered. He stood politely as if we were still pretending. He had that polished grief look, like someone playing the concerned son in a local news interview. When our eyes met, his faltered for half a second. That was all I needed. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, called the hearing to order. Colin's attorney went first. He painted a picture of a sweet, aging woman slipping into decline, making erratic decisions under the influence of unknown parties, and putting herself at financial risk. He referred to me as Mrs. Collins, like I was a case number, not a person. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, let the silence stretch a little too long, and stepped to the center. "Your Honor," I began, "my name is Eleanor Ellie Collins. I'm 64 years old, fully independent, and despite what my son wants you to believe, completely in control of my mind and my money. I submitted a psychiatric report signed and sealed by an independent evaluator, a professional Colin couldn't influence. It clearly stated I was of sound mind, emotionally stable, and entirely capable of managing my affairs. Next came the financial signing documents, hosting a small book club I joined in the nearby town, all taken in the last month. Proof of a life, a real functioning life. But the most important moment came when I looked at Colin, not the courtroom, not the judge, and said, "You didn't want to protect me. You wanted to control me. You didn't visit me for months. Then on my birthday you handed me a suitcase and called it love. You took my phone. You shut down my accounts. And now because I refuse to disappear quietly, you're calling me insane." Colin's face drained of color. I turned back to the judge. "I am not unstable. I am not lost. I am not a woman who wandered away. I walked away with reason, with proof, and with every ounce of strength I had left." There was silence. Then the judge spoke. "Mrs. Collins," she said slowly, "based on the psychiatric evaluation, the documented legal activity, and your testimony, I see no grounds to support this petition. Your rights will remain fully intact. Case dismissed." I didn't cry, but I exhaled for the first time in weeks. Colin rose in protest, but the judge waved him off. "We're done here."
No applause.
No drama. Just the gavel, clean, final, freeing. Outside, the sun hit my face as I stepped out of the courthouse. Dean followed behind and handed me back my folder. "That," he said, "was masterful." I nodded. I had just torn down the last lie my son had tried to build over me. And this time, the whole world saw it happen. After the courtroom victory, I returned home not with relief, but with purpose. Colin hadn't just tried to control my life. He'd exploited it. The files I'd quietly collected told a darker truth. Forged loan documents, stolen tax refunds, unauthorized withdrawals from joint accounts, and even a business loan taken out in my late husband's name, 2 years after Harold passed. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was federal crime. Dean, my attorney, and I met one final time in my cabin kitchen. I laid the folder flat on the table. "I want it gone," I said. "From my hands. From my future. But not from the record." Dean didn't blink. He knew what I meant. Within days, a thick anonymous package arrived at the Department of Justice, postmarked from a nearby town. Inside, over 80 pages of evidence. Everything legally notarized, cross-referenced and indexed. I didn't include my name. I didn't need to. The truth was enough. 2 months later, I was pouring my second cup of coffee when the news alert pinged my phone. Local financial advisor under federal investigation for wire fraud and identity theft. Colin's name was right there in the headline. Below it, a photograph of him in a navy suit, walking briskly past reporters with a briefcase shielding his face. I stared at the screen. The steam from my mug curled between us. They had opened a formal investigation. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't pound. Instead, I felt steady, because I wasn't hiding anymore. Within a week, more details emerged. The DOJ confirmed the charges. Fraudulent tax returns filed in multiple names, including mine and Harold's, unauthorized loans tied to dead or elderly individuals, and attempts to access trust funds through coercive legal petitions. Brandon's petition to have me declared incompetent had been a last-ditch effort to cover his tracks, and it failed publicly. News outlets picked up the story. What was once a private family matter exploded into a public scandal. Respected financial advisor exploited own mother for profit. The comments were brutal. His clients pulled their money. His wife filed for divorce. His license was suspended. The firm wiped his bio from their website. And me? I stayed quiet. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the softest, surest step in the dark. Aaron, Dean's assistant, called me a few days later. They're going for full indictment, he said. Wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft. Is he denying it? Not anymore. He's begging for a deal. I leaned against the window pane and watched the snow begin to fall outside. Let him beg, I said. But not to me. What surprised me most was how people reacted. Letters arrived, handwritten, heartfelt, from strangers who saw a part of themselves in my story. Elderly men and women, single mothers, sons who felt remorse, daughters who'd been erased. You spoke the truth we were too scared to say, one woman wrote. Thank you for not disappearing. They didn't know I almost had. They didn't know that all of this started because I refused to accept that silence was the end. The indictment went public. Colin Taylor, once the rising star of local finance, was charged on 5 federal counts. Wire fraud, forgery, coercion, exploiting a legal adult under duress, abuse of power of attorney. The mugshot told the rest. No suit, no smile, just the face of a man who built his future on deception, and finally saw it collapse. The son who tried to rewrite my story had now become the villain in his own. And I was finally free to write mine. 3 months after the court case ended and Colin's indictment made headlines, I sat alone at the kitchen table of my modest Tennessee cottage, a warm cup of tea in my hand and a sense of stillness in my chest. Not grief, not even relief, just space. Space where pain used to sit. Space where fear used to sleep. I had room to breathe for the first time in years. But peace wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. Because I wasn't the only one. In the weeks following my televised interview, letters and emails poured in. Some from strangers who had watched my story unfold on the news. Others from people who whispered their own experiences in folded notes sent by mail. Women whose children had taken over their finances without consent. Men left in care homes while their pensions were drained. Grandparents tricked into signing over homes they built with their bare hands. What happened to me wasn't rare. It was just rarely spoken about. So I decided to speak. The Walker Trust was born on a spring afternoon. Its name a nod to my maiden name. The version of myself that existed before I'd spent decades defined as someone's wife or mother. I wanted it to carry weight not just from my past but from my intention. Dean helped file the paperwork. Aaron worked pro bono to handle nonprofit structure. Ruby, my angel from the senior facility, offered to sit on the board as our community liaison. We didn't start with millions. I gave a portion of my winnings from that long-forgotten lottery ticket to fund our first grants. But what we lacked in capital we made up for in clarity. The mission was simple. Protect elders from financial abuse, educate caregivers and families, and offer legal advocacy to those too often dismissed. Our first act was creating a 24-hour hotline, staffed by retired social workers and trained volunteers. It gave seniors someone to talk to, not just to report abuse, but to be heard. Because sometimes the first injury isn't to the bank account. It's to the dignity. Then came our legal aid clinics, pop-ups in libraries, churches, and senior centers across the county, free document reviews, consultations, power of attorney education. We helped dozens of people rewrite their financial futures and reclaim their names. But the most powerful tool we launched? Storytelling. Because silence is the abuser's greatest weapon. And stories make people feel seen. I began to speak at community events, Rotary clubs, veteran halls, senior luncheons, and then conferences. At one event in Atlanta, I stood on a stage in front of 500 eldercare professionals. I didn't lead with legal stats. I led with truth. My name is Ellie Walker, I said. And on my 64th birthday, my son tricked me into a nursing facility and tried to take everything I had. The room held its breath. But what he didn't count on was that I'd take it back. They rose to their feet when I finished. Not because I was remarkable, but because I was proof. Proof that it could happen to anyone. And proof that it didn't have to end in silence. Months passed. Our reach grew. The Walker Trust formed alliances with national elder justice organizations. We trained nurses, social workers, even bank tellers on how to spot signs of coercion. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was everywhere. On panels, in articles, on podcasts, and one day, I stood outside Willow Hills, the very facility where I'd once been abandoned, watching a new community garden bloom in the front lawn, sponsored by our nonprofit, dedicated to forgotten residents. The plaque read, "In honor of those who were silenced and found their voice." I traced the engraving with my fingers and smiled. I didn't need an apology from Colin. I didn't need revenge. I had built something lasting, something louder than what was taken from me. And I wasn't done yet. There's a moment in every story, the kind you can't plan for, the kind you don't even realize is happening, where everything changes. For me, it wasn't the courtroom victory or the headlines or even the founding of the Walker Trust. It was much quieter than that. It happened on a Tuesday morning just after breakfast. I was sitting on the porch, the cat asleep at my feet, the trees still dripping with the last of the early rain. I had just finished reading a letter from a woman in Idaho, 78 years old, who had escaped an abusive guardianship after hearing my interview. Her handwriting was shaky, her words misspelled in places. But her message was clear. Your story gave me the courage to tell mine. That's when it sank in. Everything I had lost, my home, my family, my trust, it hadn't been for nothing. Because I had found something far more precious. I found myself again. If you had told me a year ago that my own son would try to erase me, I wouldn't have believed you. Colin was my baby. I held him through fevers, scraped knees, heartbreaks. I defended him when the world judged too harshly. I forgave him more times than I care to admit. But when he brought me to that senior facility on my birthday, with my suitcase already packed and my phone cut off, I saw the truth. He wasn't trying to protect me. He was trying to silence me. Not because I was sick or confused, but because I knew too much. And because I loved him enough to never fight back. At least, that's what he thought. For a while, I nearly proved him right. I sat quietly in that beige room with its adjustable bed and its view of the parking lot. I let myself believe maybe I was done. Maybe I had already lived the best years of my life. Maybe fading away was just part of aging. But real love doesn't silence you. It sees you. And when someone finally looked at me and said, "You don't belong here," it cracked something open in me. That was Imani. That young nurse with wisdom in her eyes. She saw me, not as someone past her prime, but as someone waiting to rise. And rise I did. They thought they could write my ending for me. They forgot I still had the pen. I escaped not just the facility but the lie they tried to lock me in. I fought back with truth, with paper trails, with my voice. I faced my own child in court and spoke not from rage, but from clarity. And in doing so I found freedom. Not just legally, but emotionally. I stopped apologizing for my presence. I stopped shrinking to keep peace. I stopped defining my worth by whether or not someone approved of me. I built a new life. I built the Walker Trust. And I built a voice strong enough to carry the stories of people like me, who were never meant to be quiet. Now some nights I still grieve what was lost. I grieve the version of Colin I thought I knew. I grieve the years I spent loving a son who couldn't love me without conditions. But grief doesn't rule me, because what I have now is peace and purpose. I see my name on official documents, not because someone gave me permission, but because I took it back. I see my face in articles and interviews, not as a victim, but as a survivor, as an example. And that is a legacy worth fighting for. If you're watching this right now and you've ever felt erased, ignored, dismissed, or worse, please hear me. You are not a burden. You are not crazy. You are not too late. There is power in you that no signature, no betrayal, and no courtroom can erase. There is a version of you that is still whole, still here, still worthy. And when people say they love you but their actions contradict it, remember this. Real love doesn't silence you, sees you, doesn't need to control you to claim you. It doesn't ask you to vanish to keep the peace. It makes room for your truth. So pick up your pen. Write your own ending. And if your voice shakes, let it shake. If your hands tremble, let them tremble. But don't stop speaking. Don't stop being seen. Because your story matters. Mine did. And now so does yours. Thank you for walking this road with me. Ellie Walker.